All right, welcome back to our read aloud, Dexter the Tough. Today we are ready to read chapter 5. What happened yesterday? Who can remember? Eric, what do you remember?
I don't know.
He doesn't know. Bounce it on.
Chipmunk Hudson. So he, the kid that he punched, he went over, he found him, sitting down back under a tree, picking grass, and he started talking to him, and he got mad again because all he was doing was complaining about his parents.
Yeah, and what did we find out about Dexter's parents? Cadence?
He didn't get to see him, really.
Yeah, they had to go to Seattle, which is away across the country, and we don't know why yet, but for some reason they're at the hospital. And Dexter's really upset. So who is he living with right now? Hayden?
His grandma.
His grandma. All right. Now, he hates his school. He hates everything. Do you think a lot of that anger is all because of what's going on in his life? Yeah, I do too. So the very last thing that happened, he was doing his homework, and his teacher had said, you need to tell me more about your fight. And the very last thing as to why he fought the kid, he wrote, I was mad, as hard as he could with his pencil. All right, chapter 5. Dexter put his story back in his backpack. He put the rest of the canned pears in the garbage. He put the box of graham crackers on the counter. He stood in the middle of the kitchen floor wondering what he was supposed to do next. Ha 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 ha. Someone on Grandma's TV show was laughing. Dexter tiptoed into the living room. On the TV screen, a little girl was standing in front of a whole classroom of other kids, and they were all laughing at her because her mother had used the wrong laundry detergent. Dexter had seen this commercial before. He used to laugh at it himself. Now he looked over at the couch to see if Grandma was laughing too. Grandma had her head tilted back and her eyes closed. Her glasses were practically falling off the tip of her nose. Her mouth hung open, her chin sagging down toward her chest. She wasn't moving. It didn't even look like she was breathing. Oh no, what if Grandma was dead? Grandma? Dexter whispered. No answer. On the TV screen, the embarrassed girl was replaced by a huge airplane zooming closer and closer. Grandma! Dexter screamed. Grandma bolted upright. What? Huh? She swung her head frantically side to side as if she expected to see the room bursting into flames, or a burglar crawling in the window, or a tiger leaping through the doorway. Dexter, what on earth? Dexter couldn't exactly tell her he'd thought she was dead. I finished my homework, he said. Well, goodness, that's no reason to yell, Grandma said. Were you asleep? Dexter asked. Nonsense. I was just resting my eyes, Grandma said, blinking drowsily. She shoved her glasses back into place, shook her head a little, then patted the couch cushion beside her. Want to come sit and watch with me? Dexter looked doubtfully at the TV. The regular program was back on, an old man warbling some old-fashioned sounding song. I guess not, Grandma said. Want to play outside until dinner? Dexter thought about Grandma's yard, a little rectangle in the front and an even smaller rectangle in the back. Play what? He asked. She began. Then her expression brightened suddenly. I know. I still have your Uncle Ted's bike in the garage. He used to ride it around the neighborhood all the time after school. Him and Charlie Lincoln and Franklin Jones and Anthony Teeters. What fun those boys had. I can still see the four of them riding down the street. Grandma had a faraway look on her face now, like she really was back in the past, watching Uncle Ted a little kid again. Land's sakes, that must have been 30 years ago, Grandma said, laughing a little. Here they are, all grown men now, and 3 of the 4 of them bald as posts. Dexter tried to imagine his Uncle Ted riding a bike. Uncle Ted was not just grown up and bald. He was also so tall that he had to duck his head to walk through doors. On a little kid bike, his knees would hit his chin and his long arms would dangle over the handlebars, like a clown act in the circus. Grandma stopped laughing. Oops, sorry. I shouldn't have said that, bald as posts, Grandma said. I just didn't think. Dexter remembered who else was bald now. Daddy. The medicine had made him lose his hair. But what had always looked normal and natural and right on Uncle Ted looked strange and scary and sad on Dexter's dad. So what clue have we just found out about Dexter's dad? Zoe?
He might have cancer.
Okay. So someone tell me, why do some people who have cancer during their treatments lose their hair? Josiah?
It's like what the medicine does, it kills off your hair stuff.
Yes. So if you have cancer, there's two types of treatments. One type is called chemotherapy. And chemotherapy helps to attack the cancer cells in your body, but it makes you really sick, and it does make all your hair fall out. So when people go through cancer treatments, their hair all comes out. I mean, even their like eyebrows and the hair on your arm, all of your hair comes out. So why do you think Grandma felt sorry that she was saying someone was bald as a post in front of Dexter? Madeline?
Because he had cancer.
Yeah, now his dad is kind of in that boat, right? Yeah, I think she's trying to be sensitive. Hayden?
So I feel like my funkle, he's not really my uncle, but he's a fun guy, so I call him my funkle. Just the top of his head is bald, and he was taking a medicine, but he doesn't have cancer.
Yeah. Angie, real quick, then we got to read.
I think now Dexter feels more worried and wants to cry again.
Yeah, every time he gets that reminder, right, about what he's missing. Noah?
My dad's bald.
What?
My dad's bald.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people's dads are bald. It happens. All right, we got to keep going. The key to the garage is in the kitchen drawer right by the sink, Grandma was saying now, quickly. If you need to put air in any of the tires, the bike pump's beside your grandfather's old pool table. Okay, Dexter said. He didn't feel like riding a bike anymore. He hadn't felt like it to begin with. But he couldn't stay here with Grandma right now. Why do you think he wanted to get away from Grandma? Eric?
Because he had to cry and stuff like that.
Yeah, he's feeling emotional and he's not wanting to be around Grandma. Okay, we have time for another chapter. Chapter 6. Dexter got the key from the kitchen drawer and unlocked the garage. He fought his way past Grandma's car and an old lawnmower and a bunch of old clay pots. The bike was behind a stack of wood posts. Dexter kicked at the tires. They were pretty flat. But he'd never operated a bike pump before, so he decided he didn't care. By jerking and pulling and yanking, he got the bike out to the driveway. Mom and Dad would never have made me do that by myself, he thought. They would have unlocked the garage for me and held onto the key so I wouldn't lose it. They would have pumped up the tires to make sure they were safe. They would have made me wear a helmet. Angrily, Dexter straddled the bike and kicked one pedal toward the ground. The bike lurched forward. But Dexter had forgotten about the kickstand, so the tires skidded to a halt as soon as the other pedal slammed against it. Dexter would have gone flying over the handlebars if he hadn't been holding on so tightly. As it was, he had to stretch his toe to the ground to keep from falling. The pedal scraped against his leg. Don't look, Dexter told himself. Don't look and you could forget you got hurt. See? No pain at all. None. Without even glancing down, he used the tip of his shoe to shove the kickstand up and out of the way. Then he began pedaling furiously down the block. He passed one old house after another. They blurred together, even though Dexter wasn't going very fast. Why are they blurring together? Quentin?
Because he's losing a lot of blood.
Not losing blood, but he is losing a liquid out of his face. Noah?
He's crying, so it just kind of bothers.
Yeah, you know when you're crying, even if you're not going too quick, if you're crying, everything kind of gets watery looking.
Yep.
So he's riding around mad, crying.
Mad?
Yeah, he's mad. Mom and Dad would never have let me do this, he thought. Back home, he wasn't allowed to cross the street by himself. When he rode his bike, he had to stay on the sidewalk in front of his own house. He couldn't go beyond that without a grown-up. Grandma doesn't care, he told himself. He came to the corner and let his tire bump down into the street. He rode up the wheelchair ramp on the other side onto the next sidewalk. He'd done it. He'd crossed the street all by himself and nothing had happened. So there, he thought. But it didn't really feel exciting to be out riding a bike all by himself. It felt lonely and scary and sad. Dexter crossed more streets and turned a couple corners. He kept telling himself he needed to keep track of where he was going. But he had trouble remembering, especially when he had to work so hard just to push down on the pedals and keep the bike going. And he was getting a funny idea in his head that made it hard for him to think about anything else. Maybe, just maybe, it would turn out that Uncle Ted's bike was magic, and Dexter would end up back in Cincinnati if he just kept pedaling. And Mom and Dad would be there, and everything would be okay again. Daddy wouldn't be sick, and Mommy wouldn't have all the time Mommy would have all the time in the world to be a mom. And Dexter never would have had to come move in with Grandma, or go to a new school, or hate everybody, or beat up anyone. Hey! Dexter looked up, half expecting to see his own familiar street in front of him, his own familiar house. But he was in front of a huge park now. The bike hadn't carried Dexter home. Of course it hadn't. Dexter looked at the little kids' swings and slides in the park. Wait a minute. He remembered this place. Dexter's dad used to bring him here years ago. Those times when they were all visiting Grandma, and Dexter would get squirmy sitting on her stiff furniture and trying to be polite. We boys just need some runaround time, don't we, Dex? Dad would say. And then he'd race Dexter across the park, and they'd fall on the ground in a heap, laughing and squealing. Daddy wouldn't even be able to walk to the park now, Dexter thought, kicking harder than ever at the pedals. Hey! Someone said again. Dexter had already forgotten the first yell because he'd been too busy thinking about how his bike wasn't magic and how Daddy maybe wouldn't be able to run with him ever again. But this time he looked around, past the swings and slides. Someone was waving at him. Robin Bryce. Robin came running toward him. A woman carrying a little brown dog was behind him, trying to keep up. You've got blood all over your leg! Robin shouted as soon as he was close that Dexter could hear him well. Do I? Dexter asked. He looked down, and there was a stream of blood starting where he'd scraped his leg on the pedal. It ran all the way down to his shoe. The blood was bright red, a shocking color soaking into his white sock. He felt dizzy just looking at it. Oh dear, the woman behind Robin said. I'm Robin's mom. Can you tell me what happened? Dexter shrugged. I just hit my leg against the pedal by mistake, he said. I'm okay. Robin stared, his eyes almost popping out of his head. Wow, he said. You're really brave. Dexter felt his face get hot. I better go now, he said, before I bleed anymore. He wasn't sure he could make it back to Grandma's, now that he'd seen what his leg looked like. Anyhow, the muscles in both his legs ached just from pedaling to the park. And he couldn't quite remember the directions. Had he turned right or left by the house with the yellow awnings? Still, he was scared that if he stayed here, Robin would say, See, Mom, this is the boy I was telling you about, the one who beat me up this morning. Aren't you going to call the principal now? Aren't you going to call the police? Dexter put his right foot back up on the pedal and started to push off, but Robin's mom dropped the dog and grabbed Dexter's handlebars. Oh no, she said. You can't ride home with a wound like that. And look, both your tires have gone completely flat. Dexter looked. The tires didn't look any flatter than they had when he'd started out. We live right over there, Robin's mom said, pointing to a small white house at the edge of the park. Why don't you let me clean up your wound and give you a Band-Aid, and then I could give you a ride home. I'm not supposed to go with strangers, Dexter said. Robin looked like he thought Dexter was being too picky for someone who was practically bleeding to death. But Robin's mother nodded and said, That's a smart boy. You don't know me at all. Here, let me use my cell phone and call to have someone pick you up. What's the number? She reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone. She flipped open the top and held her finger over the buttons, waiting. Dexter said, It's 555, what if he forgot the rest of the numbers? What if he said it wrong? 6381, he finished in a rush, praying it was right. Robin's mom began speaking into the phone. Hello, this is Myrna Bryce. I'm here in the park with, Dexter, Dexter told her. With Dexter, she said, and he's hurt his leg and it's bleeding quite a bit and... Mrs. Bryce seemed to be listening now. Oh, no, it's not that bad, she said. He doesn't need to go to the hospital. It's just, I don't think he could ride his bike with such a bad scrape, and it does need to be cleaned, and I just thought you might want to come and get him. She started nodding, like she was approving whatever Dexter's grandmother was saying. All right, she said finally. My son and I will stay here with Dexter until you arrive. She shut off the phone and put it back into her pocket. Dexter was glad that the dog she'd been carrying began barking just then, because Robin and his mother started looking at the dog instead of him. No Petunia, Robin said. Be quiet. The dog kept barking. Petunia, Mrs. Bryce said in a stern voice. The dog whimpered a little and lay down on its paws. He never listens to me, Robin complained. I bet he'd listen to Dexter. Do you have a dog, Dexter? Mrs. Bryce asked. Dexter thought about how his parents always used to say that he could get a dog when he was 8. But by the time he turned 8, Daddy was sick. And the one time Dexter had just kind of slightly hinted that maybe, just maybe, he should have a dog to make up for Mom and Dad leaving him at Grandma's, Mom had snapped. Dexter, really? Think about it. With everything else that's going on, do you honestly think that anyone has the time or energy for a dog? Dexter wanted to say, I do. But Mom had already left the room, gone to pack to leave. I don't have a dog, he told Mrs. Bryce now in a flat, hopeless voice. Well, if it's okay with your parents, you're welcome to come over and play with Petunia sometime. Robin would like that, wouldn't you, Robin? Mrs. Bryce said. Dexter knew he should tell her that he lived with his grandmother, not his parents. But he just shrugged and stared at the ground. He felt so tired all of a sudden. So tired he didn't even bother listening to how Robin answered his mother. Grandma got there quickly, with a hot washcloth and a plastic bag and a whole first aid kit ready on the front seat of her car. She had Dexter's cut washed, disinfected, and bandaged before he knew it. You're good at this, Dexter mumbled, leaning his head back against the seat of the car while Grandma knelt at the curb beside him. Grandma laughed. Well, you know, Dexter, I was a mother for many, many years before I became a grandmother. Grandma went around to the back of the car with Mrs. Bryce. They had the trunk open and were turning Uncle Ted's bike this way and that, trying to figure out the best way to put it in. Dexter could hear them talking, but he couldn't quite hear what they were saying. Robin stayed right by Dexter's side. I would have fainted bleeding like that, he said. Didn't it hurt? Didn't you want to cry? Dexter shrugged. I didn't notice, he said. He could have said, my dad's really, really sick, and my mom left me with my grandma, and I can't have a dog, and I had to go to a horrible new school today, and I hated everyone there, and I'm just lucky the police didn't arrest me for fighting, and maybe they still will. And you think I should cry over a stupid little scrape? Except saying that probably would make him cry. I wish I was like you, Robin said, biting his lip. Grandma and Mrs. Bryce came back around to the front of the car. It takes someone with an engineering degree to fit that bike in the trunk, Grandma said. Mrs. Bryce says they can keep the bike in their garage until your leg's healed enough that you can ride it home. Myrna, thanks so much. I really appreciate all you've done. If you hadn't been here to help... Oh, Dexter would have managed, Mrs. Bryce said, waving away the thanks. He seems like a very self-sufficient little boy. Grandma slipped into the driver's seat and pulled the car away from the curb. Dexter still had his window rolled down. That was the only reason he heard what Robin was saying to Mrs. Bryce. See, Mom? That's the boy I was telling you about. The wind caught the rest of Robin's words, so Dexter couldn't hear anything else. But he didn't need to. He slumped against his seat. Now Mrs. Bryce knows I beat up Robin, he thought. I won't ever be able to get that bike back. I won't ever be able to play with Robin's dog. I won't ever be able to come to the park again because they might see me. Well, why did Robin have to be the kid? Why did Robin have to be the kid I beat up? All right, and that is the end. All right, so we know what Dexter thinks Robin was telling his mom. Do you think he could have misheard what Robin was saying?
Yes.
Quentin, what do you think he could have been saying?
See, that's like the kid that helped me think that I could have stood up for myself.
Yeah. Maybe Robin remembers less about the fight and more about just being kind of friendly with Dexter at recess. Remember he told him he wouldn't make fun of his name and all that. Hayden?
Maybe he's telling his mom that that's the guy I want to be friends with.
Yeah, could be. So we will have to wait and find out later.
Tomorrow.
All right, all of you at home, I will see you soon. Have a great weekend.